please like and subscribe and click the bell icon to get new video updates.
Welcome to King Cole 1965 for all things Nat King Cole and more. I'm your host Danny Lamar Evans. In today's video, I'll be discussing Frankie Laine. Now, Frankie Laine had great success at Columbia Records from 1951 up until 1963. You know, Frankie was known for his classic hits like That Lucky Old Son, Mule Train, That's My Desire, Jezebel, High Noon, I Believe, and Rawhide. Frankie Laine was supposed to meet with Columbia Records executives to renew his contract. Well, this took place on November 22nd, the day that John F. Kennedy was assassinated. So the meeting was canceled, and neither Laine nor Columbia had the desire to reschedule the possible meeting. I'm assuming that Columbia Records really wasn't interested in Frankie anymore. Frankie was able to sign with Capitol Records in June of 1964. Frankie stated, "I couldn't have picked a worse time to start with them." Well, Frankie claims that it was the Beatles for the reason why the label wasn't focused on him. Now, I kind of have a hard time believing that because Frankie signed in June of 1964. You have to look at it. Nat was still living. He was a heavy hitter. Nancy Wilson was there. Peggy Lee, Tennessee Ernie Ford. Maybe it was some truth to that. If anybody else knows what took place with him being at the label at the time, leave a comment below. Let me know what you think. Within 2 years, he was at Capitol. He recorded 25 tracks for the label, and they released only 19, and nothing ever happened with any of them. They never charted. He just wasn't working. Frankie started working with Nat's producer Lee Gillette, recorded the inspirational album I Believe. The arrangements was done by Ralph Carmichael, and he conducted the sessions as well. Recording sessions took place on December 9th, 1964. Upon its release, the album really didn't do very well. Now, this album to me is a pretty good album. Ralph really puts his all into the arrangements, and Lee does an excellent job with the producing, and the songs are really good. They're very inspirational, and I really think Frankie did a great job on this album. I got this album, and I've listened to it several times, and I really enjoyed listening to this album. Now, I really think this was the last producing work that Lee did. Recording sessions took place December 9th, and as you know, Nat was already in the hospital dealing with lung cancer. And then that following February of 65, that's when Nat passed away. Lee took it very, very hard, and that led to Lee just retiring, didn't want to deal with it anymore. I think he really, really loved Nat, and it really hurt him when Nat passed. Now, Capitol tried changing producers, and they brought in a guy for Frankie. This producer's name was David AXELROD. Frankie really didn't like David. You see, David was an R&B guy and jazz producer. He worked with Lou Rawls and Cannonball Adderley and other black artists at Capitol Records. Now, Frankie said that he's got a story for you about his taste in music that will curl your hair. To this day, his judgment represents my biggest professional sorrow. So he really didn't like Dave. Now, Frankie receives a phone call from his friend Doug Lawrence, who was producing pictures out of NGM. Now, Doug had a friend named Dan Marion, who had just called him from New York and asked him if he knew Frankie Laine. And I'm pretty sure he said yes. And he tells him, hey, there's this song coming out of Broadway, a Broadway show that he felt would be just right for Frankie. He was certain it would make a great record no matter who recorded it. Frankie had stated that when Dan brought his tape over to his house and played the song for him, he said he was just stunned. And he said, here's another I Believe or another Jezebel, a song with a smash hit written all over it. Now, Frankie was very excited about the song. So he got a hold, I guess, his manager, Ray Barr. So they went up to Capitol Records and to see Dave AXELROD. Now, Frankie said he was still kind of walking on eggshells at the label, and no one had managed to pick a hit for him yet. So he said when he walked in, Dave was climbing through material, and he said he was a real hyper guy. He said he was always smoking and jumping up and down. And he said he had been a piano player until an accident damaged his left hand. So he wound up producing other acts. So he said in his jittery way, he sat up and he listened to the song. And then he said, yeah, Frank, it's a lovely tune, but it has nothing compared to some of the stuff I've been waiting for you to look at and listen to. Well, that song that David turned down was The Impossible Dream, aka The Quest. Frankie said he couldn't believe it. He said all he could say was, "Really?" And he said, "I wasn't in any position to make any waves." So he had to tell Dan that his producer said no. Well, he took back his copy, and The Possible Dream, of course, it did great things for Jack Jones and several others. He said he just knew this song would have been one of the biggest records he ever had. Instead, he was forced to settle from some incredibly weak material like Heartaches Can Be Fun or some other classics. He said from the files of David Axelrod. I'm pretty sure he really hated this guy after this. So he said nothing good ever happened after June of 1966, and he realized there was no point of him renewing his contract with Capitol Records. Now, this is how I feel about Frankie being at Capitol. They really should have worked, with Frankie with a little more better material. Dave Cavanaugh was still producing. Peggy Lee and Nancy Wilson. Hell, they could have brought back Billy May. Billy May could have did some arrangements for Nelson Riddle or Gordon Jenkins. Now that will do it on my story on Frankie Laine at Capitol Records. And as always, please like and subscribe to the channel. Click that bell icon so you'll be updated for all my future videos. Until next time, take care. Bye.
A book is to read, a seed is to sow, the rain is to fall, the